unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark. Thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off of the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him, into the ark because of the waters of the flood, of clean beasts, and of the beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in two and two unto Noah and into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th day of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the foundations of fountains of the great deep broken up, and windows of heaven were opened. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah, and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, into the ark. They and every beast after his kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. They went unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh were life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lifted up above the earth. And the waters prevailed, and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits outward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that move upon the earth, both of fowl, and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life, of all that was in the dry land, died. And every living substance was destroyed which was upon the face of the earth, both man and cattle, and the creeping things, and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth. Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him. The waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days.
Okay, thank you for reading that.
Perfect.
The first thing that I wanted to note was the localized issue, whether or not it's a global flood or whether or not it's localized in one area. And I think the fact that it's raised 15 cubits upward would reveal exactly how much land that would cover. So when I go into this, I'll just add in a little graphic showing how high 15 cubits would be, unless you already know, Jared, or Ivan.
I actually do. It's around 16,000 feet in height.
Holy moly! What does that cover?
Well, it would cover Mount, because it clearly covered the range of Mount Ararat, right? So, like, you know how sea level works, right?
Well, what do you mean by that?
You know, like, a foot of sea level is higher than just a foot, right?
I didn't know that. So how is that?
Well, because, like, if you think about it, like, you can have parts of lands that are like lower, like a valley, for instance.
Sure, and then it would flood that.
It would flood that valley, and so that would not just be 1 foot. That when you take up that measurement of that valley, that would have to raise higher than a foot, you know, for that valley to be sunk. Because once sea level goes in volume, exactly. In terms of volume, there's much more volume to a foot of sea level than necessarily 1 foot. Yeah, you can have floodwaters much deeper than if it's just 1 foot of sea level. It can be actually like 50 feet. And so the amount of feet that would be needed for this, because I think it's what? 23... because it says all high mountains are covered, right? So like 23 feet above sea level would cover most mountains, right?
And so 15 cubits, let's just do the math right now. 15 cubits equals what in feet? Oh, you said it was like 1,500 or something like that? 15.
Yeah, it's around a range, because Mount Ararat was covered, right? So it had to be at least 16,000 feet in height.
Well, from what I can see here, unless there's an old definition of a cubit, a current cubit is 15 equals 22.5 feet.
Yeah, it's 23 feet normally, roughly, if you round it up.
Sure, so you're saying 23 feet would be what's needed to cover most mountains?
Most mountains, yeah. Okay, so this is like a hard thing to explain, right?
Sure.
Because when we hear 15 feet above, we're like 23 feet above sea level, that covers, because like 1 foot of sea level covers a lot. Like, if you look at...
No, I get it. I get the concept that it's on a plane, you have to reset your altimeter because...
Exactly. Right. And that really does cover most mountains.
I understand, because not every mountain's starting at zero. Some mountains are starting... I would assume a lot of mountains are starting below sea level, and...
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly... Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just making sure, like, it's just hard to explain, right?
And sea level in different places is different, but I think that for most of places, sea level is actually like in the negatives, right?
Right. And we're also assuming our sea level is the same sea level as that time too.
Yeah, that's right.
Now,
because that could be different also.
Now, sorry to add in. I just wanted to say thanks for joining us this week, Ivan. It's great to have you. I know that you've studied some of this in your own religious teachings, and I know that you're in school to be an architect. Is that correct?
That's right. Uh-oh, here goes.
Okay. Well, I was just wanted to give you some background because it's you have some qualifications here in what you're talking about. So I imagine you have to cover some geology in architecture to understand how to make foundations and stuff like that. Is that correct or no?
Oh man, yeah, we do. But I don't know if I'm the right one to ask, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry if that's putting you on the spot with too much information, but I can cut that out if you wanted to, but if you're comfortable with that being out there. Okay, well, in that case, that's the only question I wanted to ask was if it was localized or not. And Jerry, I know that you had other things in this chapter that you wanted to cover.
Yeah, well, if also looking at it, it clearly states that everything is destroyed, right? All life on the Earth. I mean, it's not like in this area. It clearly says on the Earth.
Every creeping thing that creeps on the Earth.
Exactly, everything on the Earth. It covers the mountains, so if you're covering mountains over on one side of the world, and Mount Ararat is clearly covered, so that kind of, because the Ark rests on Mount Ararat later on, but yeah, I mean that's a pretty big deal, right? I mean, that's not like your local, oh yeah, it just flooded. Alright. So
yeah, I'm also kind of the same opinion that it must have been the whole Earth. Could also refer to the Earth as not the globe, but like the Earth or the land, right?
The ground. That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
If I was more familiar with the order of that text, I could probably tell you otherwise, but I'm not. I don't have my Septuagint in front of me, so. But I noticed one thing too that this is just a little tidbit. It's not really that important, but like in verse, I think it's 3. It says, "Come thou," right? Where is it?
It's the first verse.
It's the first verse. Yeah, that's right. It says, "Come thou," right? That's the invitation. That's the same invitation that John is given by God in Revelation 4:1. I just think that's interesting.
Come thou?
Come thou. That's what he says, apparently, when he's inviting somebody into a sacred place. So,
Is that the only two? Is it only mentioned twice? Cont'd?
I mentioned this in a few other spots, but it's always in reference to a sacred place.
Okay.
Yeah. And 7 by 7, also a lot of people think that's probably 14. It's 2 sevens.
Okay. So
Where's that?
It's just when they're talking about the animals coming onto, the clean animals coming onto the ark. It says sevens, and so it's probably by 2 pairs of 7, 7 male, 7 female.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And another thing about that too is that how would they know if they were clean or not? Because those rules weren't given out to the Jews until much later on. And yet you see that language here, so that clearly dictates that there's a previous set of knowledge of what animals were clean and unclean.
And that's an interesting point. And I think that here we see like there's an that was not exactly written, and the earlier people like Noah and everyone else, there must have been a way they worshipped and did things that were not exactly known to us, that were simply tradition. It was like official holy tradition, but it might have not been necessarily written down.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. This was actually mentioned in episode 2 when we discussed this, that there was a correct way to sacrifice, and that was why Cain's sacrifices were rejected, because he didn't follow the correct ritual.
Right.
Yeah, and as I imagine the earlier Adam and Eve, their consciousness would allow them to know what was proper or not. Like, because although they did fall, they must have been very close to God regardless, because it seemed like every step they took, like every step they made, God was like not as directly involved as he was in the Garden of Eden, but still very close, and he could have communicated with them directly at times.
Yeah, very clearly. Very clearly.
Now, I can't help but notice that there's 40 days and 40 nights specifically mentioned. Does this have anything to do with Lent?
I'm not sure.
Well,
Because
why
Lent
40?
Lent is based on Jesus's 40 days and 40 nights of not eating.
Right.
So
why
which is
40?
based on? Isn't that based on the desert wanderings of Moses, and also perhaps even that was probably based, whether it was directly or whether it was intentional or not, that might have been based on the ark too, right?
It could be. It could be a way that God is putting a sign or a seal on something, showing you that these things are related to salvation. Because if you look at the ark, it really is a course of salvation. If you trust God, you're saved. If you didn't trust him, you die. God told everyone, hey, there's going to be a flood, and everyone's like, I don't care. And Noah, listen, Noah made an ark, and the people that followed him survived.
I also think that's right. Absolutely.
So 40 days is a testament of faith. If you can have faith through the 40 days or 40 years, throughout the 40, whatever that is, then God will save you or something like that. I don't know. That's
well, yeah, because if you look at the desert, right, when the Jews Moses was when wandering through the desert, if you look at it, a lot of the Jews fell away during that time. However, their children made it.
I also think it's important to see the psychological context of these things. So, for example, 40 years, just the state of people's minds. I don't think it's the same as it is today. And I mean, as in,
Well, what do you mean? That
to describe, but now we may think it's cruel or it's difficult. However, I think within the context of everything, for example, Adam and Eve, although and whatever happened after, they're still considered kind of like the forefathers. They're considered saints. So because and even though they fell in consciousness in their condition, as you could say, they still had a very pure relationship with God, even afterwards. So with Noah's time and his the people surrounding Noah, perhaps come to think of it like sorry, I don't want to. I hope you can cut out all the ums that I do. But
don't worry about it. You're good.
Perhaps at the time, people had a closer understanding of these things, and like even the age to which everyone lived to was much longer than now. So just like mental and psychological, if you live to 100 years, you're one person. If you live to 600 years, as they did back in the day, as it says, you might be a different kind of person. You might learn different things, and I think it goes to show that at that time, the people that did not listen to Noah and weren't close to God at the time, it might have been by choice and not just like, how to explain it, like, I think that even in the Old Testament, is what I'm saying, even in the Old Testament, I think what God does would be fair, and he wouldn't punish someone that could repent. You know what I mean? Like, yes. That's why what happened is not because people were, just wiped away, but because they were in such a state, and
there was evil in their heart.
They were also willfully kind of on this kind of thing. So
it even says that their hearts were filled with evil all the time, like all the time. That's a pretty brutal statement.
Yeah, very direct, very concrete.
Yeah.
So I think, like, comparing it to this day is very, very different. And that's just my point to make, is that, the condition of people and their minds is something that we're not necessarily aware of, but something we can pick up on by reading and analyzing these things. Mm-hmm. And same thing with in the later readings on Sodom and Gomorrah, for example. Like, there was an example of just like, God trying to do everything, and these righteous people trying to do everything to appease people and, like, to at least curb their bad deeds, like they were just not wanting to. So
exactly,
my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's a fundament of heart. All this is a fundament of heart, because God clearly shows that he's merciful. And even in this flood, if you really look closely at it, I forget where it says it, but in one of the verses it mentions God shutting in Noah, right? He's actually there shutting Noah into the ark. He's the one that's doing it. So that's a pre-incarnation probably of Jesus. And he's shutting Noah into the ark. So Noah became this special object of divine care and protection, right?
Yes.
And there's only one door, and God shut it. He gave him perfect security, and not one person in that ark was lost. So that's like God saying, look what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to see you through this disaster, this terrible time. He's there to protect.
Okay, so Jesus is one of Noah's progeny. Then is what you were saying.
No.
Sorry, not progeny. One of his children. Not direct children, obviously lineage.
Not one of his lineage. Well, yeah, technically yes, in a way. You would have to.
Yeah, what we would all. But I think what he was saying is he's likened, right? Like,
No. It actually says God shut Noah in, and God's physical manifestation on earth has been Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you can see certain parts of the Bible where these certain people are mentioned as, like, you know, the angel of the Lord, for instance, or they'll say the Lord did this, right? And it's a physical person on earth that's it's talking about. So there's always been physical manifestations of Christ, even before, because if the Trinity existed, it would have had to have been pre-incarnate before Christ came to earth, right?
What do you mean by that? Pre-incarnate?
The Trinity would always have to exist because God can't necessarily miss this all at once. He created himself three different parts. So
of course, that's essential, to God, yeah.
Yeah, he would have just been the three different parts.
So God was always God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, even before he manifested himself as Christ on earth?
Yes.
Is that what we're saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Christ always, that's news to me. So Christ always existed in heaven with God just after.
No.
Okay.
Not that way.
That's the most interesting thing. That's the whole point of, one of the interesting, beautiful things about the incarnation. Well, so don't quote on me on this because I'm not a theologian or even like, I'm not even a good, very knowledgeable about this, but that's the whole thing is Christ as a person, as a persona, human persona. That's kind of the huge miracle is that he became incarnate and his personality was made man at that time, and he never existed as that human nature before that.
Well, he could have appeared as that, right? Because like there's clearly he existed clearly. That
he existed.
Part of him existed.
Well,
but it wasn't made into what we know as Christ.
Well, I wouldn't say that part of him existed. It only existed historically during the incarnation, but of course he existed as God the Son, or the Son of God, being born before all ages, right, from the Father.
There's an issue with that because Christ is actually mentioned as being the one who molded the earth. The Son is mentioned as that, the one who shaped the earth.
Yeah, of course, but not in a physical form. Not incarnate as not being born of a woman. Let's just say that.
Not being born of a woman, but he could have had physical manifestations of it. Because you see that quite often in for instance, you have Melchizedek, the king and priest, right? Okay. And Christ says, "I am the one after the order of Melchizedek," right? And he will make you after the order of Melchizedek. And that's a very weird statement because people are worshiping this thing. And the only person that gets worshipped and it's considered righteous is God. There's no angel that's worshipped. So it would have to have been a pre-incarnate manifestation of Jesus. And it was kind of interesting because Melchizedek's kingdom was in Salem. And Salem is where Jesus was, in Golgotha.
Okay, so I'm actually not very familiar with Melchizedek. I'm just trying to. You guys go ahead, and I'll try to catch up here. But I am.
You're good.
Oh, okay. Everything's fantastic. This is a very good conversation that you were having. But
I'm not sold either way. I don't know because I wasn't there, type of thing. Like these are just theories. Okay. So like I'm trying to keep it so that like the entire audience can be encircled in this. Because some people are going to hold those views, and I want to represent those views. I myself, I don't know, but I know the views, so I'm just putting it out there.
I know what you mean. I try to put up questions that I know people would have that I already have answered, but and have been answered. But nonetheless, three new characters: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. What is Japheth? What is their significance?
Well, they. Okay, so all nationalities are out of those people, right? Because they would have to. Clearly, their wives were of other races, because we have other races. If that wasn't the case, we would have a single race on the earth, right?
Sure, but where did they get their wives? Oh yeah, they took them into the ark. So.
Yeah, they're pre-diluvian people.
Now they're not from.
Diluvian means before the flood.
Pre-flood, yes. Now the question is, the wives. They're not from Noah, but Noah's lineage is pure in their spirit. So
right,
and
in their genealogy also.
Genetics, yes. So
yeah, their genetics.
The wives. The
wives very well may not have been, but they were spared by virtue of trusting God. Everyone, the invitation to get on that ark was for everyone. It wasn't just for Noah. That was an invitation that was open to everyone, and they rejected it.
Because it's some lunatic that's building some giant ark and wants you to get onto it, and you're like, nah, there's no God. What are you talking about, Noah?
Well, it hadn't rained before. They didn't know what rain was. This is before rain even happened.
Yeah.
Because it mentions that the earth was irrigated from the ground up, right? And actually, this is a very interesting topic, because a lot of people think the flood was just a big rain storm, right? But it says that the fountains of the earth burst up, right? Well, if the fountains under the earth that burst up, that means that there was a lot of water that was released from the ground.
Well, that's geysers.
Geysers, exactly. You would see fissures. And it's kind of funny, because if you look at the world, you'll see a giant ring around it of a huge fissure. Call it the Mariana Trench, but if you look, it continues all the way around the world. It's a big trench. It's like a baseball, which is a big ring. Split, right?
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. So wait. So then the Earth would have been all one giant land. But then how did the trees and crops and you said
irrigation? Because if you think about it, if the ground naturally irrigated itself, right? The water raised up from the ground, right? It's like. All right.
I get it. Irrigation.
No. There's a little bit more to it. There's ground irrigation too, to it. However, let's say you had, because there's supposedly a canopy, right, around the Earth of some kind. They got a very thick vapor barrier, right, that blocked out the sun, right? Or at least helped with blocking out the sun somehow.
Okay, yes.
So it would lower the cosmic radiation that the world took in, which would mean that it wouldn't rain. That moisture would just stay in the air. It would just be very moist, right?
Okay, so we're talking a very humid Earth.
We're talking very humid Earth, yep. And so if something like were to break that barrier, right? Let's say it was an ice barrier or anything, a water barrier that was just around the Earth.
A firmament.
A firmament that was held by a magnetic, ability. Because you can do that. I mean, we already know that can happen. If you have a magnetic field, you can hold up water, suspended. So let's say that magnetic field was just suddenly shut off, right? And all that just came crashing down, right? That would not only cause a lot of destruction, it would cause a lot of heat, right? And so you would see that the Earth, and you have the fountains bursting up, which would cause an area of cool, right? In between those, the storms would just be crazy, tearing up everything, right? So you have this huge catastrophe, and it just rips up the entire Earth. It would be very sudden, it would happen very quickly, and it would freeze things. Because you would suddenly have this burst of heat and cold coming together, and things would naturally freeze, right?
So, I think it's interesting to note that, things can be interpreted very differently in different ways here, and there's no like, perhaps it's hard to say like if there's one correct way in terms of like the exact to do something that really closely fits. We can only keep thinking about it, and the point is not not necessarily like how it happened, and that's interesting, but the fact that that it did happen, and our interpretation of it just kind of like enlightens our mind. Sort of imagine it in a realistic sense, like.
But what would the things that you would see from that? Because fossils don't form they don't form with decay. Like, you can't have something decay to form a fossil. It has to suddenly be a quick change, right? That's why you don't see fossilized deer and stuff like that often.
Well, could the fountains of the earth be lava by any chance? I just thought of that.
It could be. It really could be. Yeah, it could be that too. It probably was a mix of everything like that, because we also know that there's crystals under the earth that hold water, and they can hold a lot of water. The scientists are recently discovering this. And if those were there, right, they would have to be used to soak up the water. Now, if those were originally something that released and took in water because of God, doing something cosmological to have that happen, if those all released at once, it would cover the entire Earth with water. I mean, there would be nothing. There'd be nothing without having water covered. I mean, scientists already agree with that. It is so massive. It's such a massive amount of water that it's unrealistic how much is in those crystals. And that's not including the oceans that are already underneath the Earth, right? Another point is you have a lot of people that doubt that a flood happened. You can look at the Grand Canyon, right? Grand Canyon has a river flowing uphill, right? The way that it's formed, the river would have to flow uphill. You can't have that happen.
Why?
So clearly if you look at the level of it, the river flows. It would flow uphill. It wouldn't flow downhill. If you look at the depth in places.
Okay, we'll have to investigate that.
Yeah, check that one out.
I have a friend who's a geologist, and I'm going to ask her specifically about that.
Yeah, ask her how that happens.
Okay.
It's a very interesting one.
We'll update that in a future video.
I like how you guys are so curious about everything. It's awesome.
Yeah. You got the mid-oceanic ridges, right? The mountains underneath the ocean, in which, once again, with fissure in the middle of them. It's like the Earth split open, right? Like, they're not tectonic plates. These are splits in the Earth. Like something just burst out of the Earth and made these mountains, right? You got all the submarine canyons that you have, right? There's magnetic variations on the ocean floor that are completely unexplained. Like, there should not be areas where they're more magnetic or less magnetic. It should be fairly, even.
There's also another...
You have...
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, go.
There's also a very interesting phenomenon of the deserts. If you look at the deserts from up high, they look like beaches, sandy beaches, and it's evidence of a giant flood.
Yep, that is true.
Could be interpreted. Yeah, that's interesting.
There's also a mammoth cave where a bunch of woolly mammoths were all dropped into one specific spot. I don't know if it's relevant to this, but
fossil graveyards.
Yeah, so
they're in spirals.
What I was thinking was, if there was a big flood, it would carry a bunch of bodies into giant basins where it deposit huge groups of animals. You should see that. Bill Nye the Satanist guy said what you would see was animals trying to climb to higher ground, and so you should see different layers in the rock of fossils from different animals, but you don't see that, or animals from different times, but you don't see that. That's something.
Right.
That's basically what he says. I'll clip that in and have us respond to that another time. But the idea is basically that the animals would try to climb to higher ground, but they don't. Now, what I'm saying is, if there was a giant flood, they would get washed, and they would get washed into these basins. And you see that with this mammoth cave, with these mammoths that they said, the official story is that they walked and wandered into it over time, and they all just kind of, all these mammoths just kind of fell into the same pit, and it's just mammoths for no reason. I'll cut that out. That these mammoths just kind of wandered into this cave and dropped in, and that's the official story, whereas it seems more obvious that some kind of massive flood carried them there.
Yep. Actually, you can actually look at something called a fossil graveyard, and what it is, it's a collection of different animals, like all kinds of different animals, right? And they're laid out in a spiral normally, right? And they're just they're all dismembered, but there's a big collection of just bones all over the place, right? Fossilized stuff all over the place in like these spirals. So like if the water was lowering, right? Water tends to spiral when it gets to certain areas, right? So you would see these bodies laid out like that if they were dead bodies.
In spirals.
In spirals. And that's exactly what you see. You see frozen mammoths, right? They were suddenly frozen. What could suddenly freeze a mammoth? Like, some of them even have food in their mouth still. Like, how is that possible?
Well, Randall Carlson, who is the one that was responsible for finding this mammoth thing, and the one that pointed out that the waves in the sand look like sandy beaches, he did the work on that, and excuse me, it just slipped my mind what you were just mentioning. Oopsie daisy.
The frozen mammoths?
Oh yes, the theory. Don't worry, I'll clip that out.
Sure, no problem.
The theory, and it's marked by a long period of silence. So that's how I always edit things, is I find a long period of silence. So once again. And the problem with the mammoths was that Randall Carlson had found was that an asteroid had come down about 1,200 years ago and wiped this out, and some period before that, and that was the period before that was what was responsible for this giant flood that washed away the mammoths. And so I was just saying that an asteroid might be responsible for flash freezing or kind of locking things into place.
It could be. And imagine if we did have some type of water barrier or something like that, and an asteroid hit it, well, everything would come crashing down.
Yes.
Just saying. Also, you can look at metamorphic rock, too. And which we shouldn't have those, right? Because, like, if you look at the different layers of the sediment, right? Everyone's like, hey, geology, you've heard of the geologic column, right?
The what?
Geologic column?
No.
Okay, so geologists use a geologic column to date things, right?
Okay.
In which they're like, the different layers of sediment is a different date, right? Well, if you take a jar of dirt, right, just grab a bunch of jars of, grab some sand, some dirt, shake it up in a container, and let it sit. And after a while, you will see that the heavier layers of dirt are at the bottom, whereas the right, and it forms little layers in that jar, and that happens with a flood. Same thing. So, once again, they use the geologic column to date the fossils, right? And they say that this is the reason why that the flood couldn't have happened, right? Because the fossils are all different layers. And the birds are above the dinosaurs and yada, yada, yada. But you got to think about the bones and the remains are heavier on the bigger animals as opposed to the lighter animals, which would be, more towards the top of this geological.
Those are very, very good points, and I think it's very interesting to think about it this way. So what I have to say about that is, things could work in different ways. Sorry, just cut that out. I just can't put it into words, but sorry, just keep going. We'll cut that later.
It's okay.
Take your time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Formulate your thoughts, man.
Take your time. The long silence, it's very easy for me to clip out. So if you want to take a moment and gather your thoughts, go for it.
And could we get back to Melchizedek after?
Sure.
Because I did read up on him while you guys were speaking, actually. And just to clarify, in Orthodox theology, Melchizedek was not Christ.
Okay.
So the interpretation, the understanding, as far as I understand, he was not even an angelic, kind of how the Trinity appeared as three angels.
Yep.
He was not even that. He was a human being, a priest, and he was not divine. I'm just trying to find the right place here. So here. So Melchizedek comes bearing earthly wine and bread, but Jesus gives up himself for nourishment. So his name means "my king is righteousness," and the place with which he's associated, Salem, is probably Jerusalem. It sounds like the Hebrew word for peace or shalom. So it's not the literal word. It sounds like it, and I'm just trying to find this. Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll through this really quick.
No problem.
Okay. Just a moment. So Melchizedek, he was kind of like the, how the burning bush that Moses saw in the desert, or like the ladder that was seen in a dream.
Jacob. Yep.
By Jacob's ladder, yeah. That was kind of like the precursor, or kind of like the like a vision for things to come. It wasn't same thing with Melchizedek. Like he got the honor of like King David did. He got the honor of kind of being like a model of of righteousness, or like an allegory for what Christ would be. But Christ would be and something to actually fulfill that vision fully. So that's the Orthodox understanding, that Melchizedek was a man who was a priest, who was righteous, and he was a king. And just trying to find a place here that really explains it well. Sorry guys, I know I'm making a lot of noise.
Silence is good. Silence is good for editing.
Okay. So there may have been some mystical Jewish rabbis who honored Melchizedek at the time when the New Testament was written, and who speculated that he was actually an angel rather than human. But Melchizedek's role has long faded in the past of Genesis, that we may remember him mostly through the book of Hebrews. Jesus, on the other hand, is the same yesterday and forever. Melchizedek bursts upon the story in Genesis with no idea of this genealogy, and so he symbolizes one without father or mother. But Jesus was being one with the Heavenly Father. So here it clearly refers to Melchizedek as someone that his genealogy was not known and was a mystery. So he symbolized the one with the mother and father. So he was kind of like the symbol of what Christ would fulfill fully. So, yeah.
Okay.
Just to clear that up. So.
Yeah. Sure. All right.
Yeah. So.
There's one more thing, too, to talk about, and that is the jigsaw fit of the continents. A lot of people will use that as an example of Pangea, right? Mm-hmm. They'll say, oh, well, the Earth must have been all fit. is that one shape. They're like, yeah, because as the tectonic plates separate, right? Well, that would be the case if the tectonic plates were all of one piece. Because the splits with the tectonic plates don't fit like that anymore.
Okay.
Like, you can't layer the tectonic plates to reshape the world into that type of shape.
One continent, you mean?
Yeah, once again, a lot of people forget that, underneath the water, there's land, So you're trying to put that puzzle piece back together, it doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
So, just pointing that one out, too. What else is there? Oh, and also, a lot of people don't notice this. A lot of people think that the arc was 40 days and 40 nights alone. Yeah, it rained for 40 days, right? And it says the waters prevailed for 150 days. And they were floating for several months. But the entire ordeal took 377 days.
Right.
So that's much longer than 40 days.
That's a good point.
Yeah, a lot of people completely miss that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they also say that the waters prevailed on the last line, 24, verse 24, and the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days.
Yep.
So yes, that is a lot longer than 40 days, and what you just mentioned is a lot longer than 40 days. So is there any significance to the number 150?
Actually, I don't know that one. I'm not very versed on numerology.
Okay, well, we might come across 150 again, and I will certainly remember it, and if anybody in the audience wants to point it out, that would be very useful.
And just one more note about it. There's only one arc, right? And only one door into that arc. So that is kind of a type of salvation in general.
And only one window.
And only one window. Yeah.
Curious what kind of window that would be, and what it would be made of.
Oh, yeah, Ivan. Is the arc possible? Those cubits was like 300 cubits. We read it in the last episode, but I'm sure you know what it is. Is it possible from a structural standpoint?
Is it possible? You know what? I need to be like a PhD to really like say something on that.
That's fine. Can we bring it to and allow me, because I don't mind embarrassing myself. Not that I think that this would be an embarrassment, but I don't mind bringing it to one of our professors and asking.
Sure.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Do you want the dimensions of it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so depending on your cubit size, because some people say a cubit's 18 inches, other people say it's 25 inches. A cubit was really just a measurement of your palm of your hand to your fingertips. So depending on how big Noah's hands and his sons were, a cubit could be of different size. Right? Kind of like how a foot is generally 12 inches, but it was originally just a measurement of your foot.
Wait a minute, doesn't that mean that Noah would be a giant?
He could be.
Why?
Didn't you say the giants were evil?
No, people would have been bigger to begin with back then because of the higher oxygen level.
Okay, that's a possibility, I guess.
And also the age too. Like if you look at a Neanderthal, right? Like your ears don't stop growing, your forehead doesn't stop growing. There's certain features on a human body that never stops growing, right? And so you're figuring Noah's 600 years old, or at that time he was like 300, right? When
that's a great point to make. Yeah, but some features.
He would have some features that are abnormally large.
Well, we wouldn't know if it really stopped growing because we don't know a person who's 600 years old, right? And
exactly.
Also with the Neanderthals, what they discovered the first one they discovered actually had arthritis, like severe arthritis.
Yeah, the guy with rickets.
Yeah, I think so. And what they found is,
Piltdown man.
His skeleton was fully, like malformed.
Yep.
So we thought that Neanderthals would have like these features. They would like were and all like kind of brute looking and all that, but it was based on funny enough, it was arthritis that he had. So his skeleton formed differently.
Some of them are pig bones. Some of them, it's kind of funny if you go into that stuff, how many hoaxes there is. But it's okay. So one way it's 450 feet. If it's 18 inches, if it's up to 25 inches, it could be 625 feet, right? Which it'd be 75 feet and 45 feet. Okay, here are the dimensions of it at 18 inches, right? I guess this is the best way to do it. It'd be 450 feet by 75 feet by 45 feet, right?
That's very small, eh?
It's actually not. That's pretty big. Same thing with if it's 25 feet. 25 inches. It's 625 feet, 104 feet by 63 feet, right?
Can anyone do the calculation for square footage here?
Sure. There's 1,710 feet for the first one. And there's 2,376 feet for the other one.
Okay, why are there two measurements?
Depends on the size of the cubit.
One is the cubit is 18, and the other is the cubit is 25-ish.
Right. Still sounds very small to me, so I'm gonna have to check back, and maybe we can insert some stuff later to edit it in. But maybe, sounds a little small. But
Unless anybody has any other points to make, I would say this was a great success. We reached our hour, and I can certainly clip this down. And I've actually been able to speed things up by putting it at 125%. You can't even notice a difference. It just eliminates the negative space in all of our words. And it's just a slight boost that you can't really notice it, but it chops things down from 60 minutes to 45 minutes.
Okay. Does the pitch change?
Just a what?
The pitch. The musical. Yeah, the pitch. Like, are we higher in?
No, I'm using Adobe, so it's the option is to maintain constant pitch. And like I said, you can't even notice.
Sounds good. And
I had one last point though.
Yeah.
About the arc, because this is really a type. There's only 3 different types of people in the Ark story, right? There's those that perished in the flood, obviously those that died. There are those that were saved on the Ark, right? And there's one dude that was removed before the flood happened, and that was Enoch. And if you're looking at that as a type, that could be a type of the Rapture. Just putting it up.
Right, so God invited Enoch up with him to walk with him before the flood happened. So right. Enoch's removed from the situation.
Yes. Now, I'm not saying that is support for your rapture. I'm just saying that's a type out there. If you're willing to go down that rabbit hole, sure can.
Another little point I wanted to make is, the variety of animals could have been different then than it is now.
Yes.
So with I don't know if you guys are big into like evolution or just like different ways animals adapt and stuff, but like I have no problem with it. And what I think is it could have been that the animals were just the animals then had there were a couple of varieties, and then they became more varied as time went on after. So over a long period of time, with I don't know, it just could have been one of those things that there wouldn't have been as much variety as there is now,
Well, if you look at dogs, I mean, you take... Okay, so you have two wolves, right?
Yeah.
And you put two wolves in the yard. And how many breeds of dogs are there now? Because dogs came from wolves.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, there's like, what, 600 something breeds of dog? I think it's even more than that. It's a crazy number of dogs. And you got that from two wolves.
Are dogs from wolves or wolves and like coyotes and like whatever the Australian version is, right? Where there's a dingo. I guess it could have been like 2 or 3 or 4 to start with, and whatever traits
You
they
could have
have.
had one.
Went to the
Seriously.
extreme.
And just look at it. Because if you look at the short period of time you've been breeding dogs, we've been breeding dogs since, we have the Akitas and stuff like that from like ancient Egypt and junk.
Yeah.
But really, dog breeding didn't really start getting full throttle until, the time of the Romans.
Yes. And it's actually interesting that I was reading the Roman epithets, like epitaphs, for dogs that passed away that the Romans had. And I don't know if you're aware, but like they made little, some dog owners made little tombstones for their dogs, and like they just wrote very interesting things. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
It's a tangent, but they wrote, like, they were really close. This was like 2,000 years ago, and they just they expressed how much of a friend the dog was. Like, I'll link it up to you just for fun.
That's cool. That's cool. Actually, I'd be really interested in reading that.
All right. Well, I would say this was a great success, and if you feel itchy to keep going, then I would say that means that we have something worthwhile here to continue on for next week, or later on this week for a special broadcast with a special guest.
Interesting. Who's the guest?
This would be a friend of my father's who is very well versed. He's an author. He was adopted by an Indian tribe. Very interesting character, and he has some pretty out there theories about some things that we all believe. So I think it would be an interesting topic for us all to be a part of. I'll be in touch with the details on that, and until next time, this was a great broadcast, and I hope Ivan will join us in the future.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you, Ivan.
You too.
You had some really good contributions to this.
Thanks. I wish I could contribute better, but for next time I'll read it.
Dude, you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Oh.